Welcome to the Voices of Hospice Leadership podcast, the show that reveals how to take your hospice to the next level. We cover all things hospice, from marketing and automation to billing and operations. You'll also hear from professionals in the industry as they share their stories of success and practice growth tactics. Here is your host, Brian France.
Well, hello, everyone. With me today is Ashleigh Lugar, right?
Lugar.
Lugar.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about the moments that change care, split second, the split second when a leader doesn't match someone's energy, and the quiet aha moments that turn compliance into commitment, and how hospice partners can be a true layer of support inside senior living. So I'm your host with the Voice of Hospice Leadership podcast. Our guest today, Ashleigh, welcome, with Merrill Gardens, supporting communities across, Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama, right?
That's correct.
Awesome. And you've been 2 decades in senior living, passionate about hospice and leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been on both sides of the fence there. So, yeah, I'm Ashleigh. I'm a registered nurse. I've been in senior living now for 20 years. I started out actually as a caregiver in assisted living at 16 years old, part-time after school. And slowly over time, especially right when I got out of high school, I wanted more. I wanted to learn more about senior living because I just really found my niche there. And so I went on to become a med tech. I got actually state certified at 18 years old. After that, I kind of, worked as a med tech a little bit, learned a lot while I was there. And where I was in my current role, they decided to promote me to memory care director. Super, super nervous about that because I'd never been a director in my life. I was 19 years old. Didn't really know what that looked like, but, super excited for the opportunity. So I became a memory care director, and I did that for a little bit until I had that nudge again that I wanted to be a nurse. And from there, I became a nurse, and I worked actually directly after nursing school. I went and got a job at a cardiac step down at a level 1 trauma hospital, learned a lot. But I also realized that I really missed taking care of the elderly and working in senior living. And so naturally, going back to my roots, I went back as a resident care director where I oversaw a 120 bed facility of memory care and assisted living. And I can tell you, during my tenure as a resident care director, it was also COVID. Anybody can tell you, everybody has their struggles or stories that came out of COVID, but I can tell you, being a nurse through COVID will change you. And if it didn't, then I don't know what planet you were on. But it really changed the way that I looked at things and the way that we took care of people, specifically the elderly. And so, from there, I really just decided that, I want this to be my thing. I want this to be, my career, and I want to further myself. And, after doing that position for 2 years, I was actually promoted to regional director of health services. And boy, that is a challenge on itself. Absolutely love it. You have to love it to be in this type of job. But I currently work for Merrill Gardens, as you said. We're based out of Seattle. I've been there for about 2 years now. I cover the Southeast. So again, I have Texas, Mississippi, Alabama. I support assisted living and memory care clinical operations primarily. And so, yeah, we do see a lot of hospice specifically when it comes to senior living because, a lot of times that's when we're we're seeing the need. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here today and to talk to you and all about senior living and how that correlates with hospice.
Awesome. And what's your role at Merrill Gardens?
So I am regional director of health services.
Regional.
Yeah, so I'm currently over a few communities scattered throughout, the U.S. I've had communities all the way from Oregon to Florida. So
Yeah.
practiced, all states are different regulations, different standards, things like that. And so kind of learning to work on the flow of that, but
Yeah.
also able to kind of lead where you're best fit to.
Awesome. Great context. Now let's maybe dive into your why. So what sparked your passion for hospice within senior living?
You know, um, hospice, I'll say this because I've been on both sides of the fence. I've worked in just straight hospice, and I've also worked in senior living, of course. And so seeing the two combine it really is something.
Yeah.
Working in senior living, you have people who work with residents day in and day out, and they know their routines, they know their family members, they know their residents.
Right.
And so when we're seeing changes, we're able to see them earlier, usually, than when they're in a home setting. So, for instance, when you're having residents that are experiencing weight loss, when they're no longer, really able to make their needs known, or maybe they're experiencing some weight loss, they're not wanting to eat, they're not sleeping well. Those are all signs to us that there's a change. That
Yeah.
might not necessarily be the case in a home setting because that's just not something you look for. But as professionals in our setting, we're able to pick up on that faster and a lot sooner in that process. Um, the elderly, that's mostly where you're going to see hospice because, as we age, our bodies all slow down. And so hospice is very prevalent a lot of times when it comes to assisted living because, we really like to tout the fact that, we age in place. So, meaning you may come into an assisted living setting and you don't need a lot of care. Maybe you're just there for socialization. But as years go by, disease prognosis happens. We may be needing more care, and we can do that all the way up until the end. And so sometimes that leads to hospice. And I think as professionals in assisted living, when we're able to identify that sooner, we're able to educate families, number one, get them on board with hospice, get them to understand that it's not scary, that it's something that, we consider in assisted living as a layer of support for the family. Um, you know, Hospice is really tough conversation. It can be. And I think when you have the right people in place, hospice can be a really great thing. And I think when you have the right people on board, it can be really successful.
Awesome. That was great. What do you have a story, a formative story that still guides how you lead?
Um, Lead as in what?
Lead in your role.
Oh, so in my role specifically for leading, I always want to talk about leading with compassion.
Yeah.
And specifically that because, like I said, COVID really changed the way that I deal with things or the way that I look at situations and honestly, the way I look at people. Um, Leading with compassion is a very, very, it can be a very hard skill set to learn if you don't have the right tools. And so leading compassion is really at the end of the day, it's about prioritizing your understanding of the person that you're talking with or you're interacting with. So one of the my favorite sayings is seek to understand before you seek to be understood. Um, at the end of the day, we work in healthcare, so we're people working with people. And so there's going to be mistakes on both sides. There's going to be, tough conversations, tense situations. And I think when we approach those types of, incidents with compassion and understanding and really trying to understand where that person's coming from, what their background is, maybe they had a terrible day and you're just getting the brunt of it. Really understanding that it's not you necessarily,
Yeah.
that, it's not a personal, vendetta against you. It's everything coming out.
Right.
And I think whenever you're able to identify that and understand that, you're able to approach and handle that conversation with a lot more grace and understanding. Which, kind of ties into, we talked about, matching energies, right? So when we're matching energies, it's very, very easy to be defensive of
Mhm.
yourself or your work or whatnot if somebody comes to you and they're really upset. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of skill to understand that, again, that person is going through something that we may not know anything about. So when we're able to, again, see that this person's coming in, they're upset, slowing it down, stepping back, taking a breath, and understanding what the root cause is, you're going to have a much more successful end and resolution to this conversation.
Mm.
So I think, again, having, emotional intelligence is a big one. That's something that I think every leader should really read, especially Dr. Bradberry's book on emotional intelligence. It really opens up to kind of how you interact with people every day, and how you interact emotionally. And I think, when you're able to not match that energy, you're able to take that step back and understand and process what's going on. You're able to have a great conversation and end with a positive resolution.
Yeah. Love it. What's one misconception you hear about hospice that you correct most often, and maybe how you reframe it?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, hospice still has that stigma of they're dying and they're dying right now. Um, and, in every sense of the way, that could not be more true. We have residents again that live years on a hospice.
Mm.
And I want to tout that, because if they're living years when you have to have less than 6 months according to Medicare guidelines,
Yeah.
if you're extending that, you're getting good care. You're getting great care, actually.
Mm.
And so, with that being said, hospice is just really able to have that support for families, for caregivers, for the nurses in the community, because they could be really hard conversations.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that when we have that support from hospice, supporting the nurse, supporting, the family,
Yeah.
I think that that it could be a beautiful thing, because at the end of the day, w- what is important is that this resident is being taken care of. They're not in pain. We are dignifying their care. We're following their wishes. And so I think a really important thing to know is, just because you're on hospice doesn't mean you're dying today. Do you
Yeah.
have a terminal illness that we're projecting 6 months? Yeah, unfortunately, you do. But that, as in senior living, we kind of approach it to where it is a kind of a layer of support. So we are supporting the family. And I can tell you, especially in the senior living communities, the families are the one that's having to deal with this.
Yeah.
Um, Now, the residents, of course, depending on where they are in their disease prognosis, or if they have, dementia or something like that, they may not know that they're dying, or they may know. At the end of the day, though, the family is the one that needs the most support a lot of times. Um, and I think when we're able to educate early on and letting them know that, hey, we're picking up on these, we're looking at, all these signs that there may be signs of a transition coming on, things like that, we're better able to prepare them. Because what's scary is a lot of times we don't know what's next, right? We don't know what's coming. And so families, that is usually where I see a lot of fear when hospice is brought up. And so I think whenever you're able to set those expectations as to what it is,
Yeah.
what it's going to provide, and how it's going to dignify and take care of this person that truly could use it. I think it's all about your approach and how you lay it out, um, and letting them know that hospice can be a positive thing.
Love it. Yeah, families they equate hospice, right, with dying tomorrow.
Yep.
Or yeah, I remember when we spoke last week that that was a big thing. So what's your go-to sentence when someone asks like so when do you start the morphine or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. And, unfortunately, I've had that situation where they're able to see that, the need is there. Um, and then they come to me and they're like, okay, I think we're okay with hospice. So when do we start the morphine, and how long do they have after that to die?
Mhm.
That right there tells me we should be doing a better job when it comes to educating, and we should really sit down with this family and get them to understand that's not what hospice is.
Right.
We don't Hospice doesn't euthanize. It is there to make sure that they're comfortable,
Yeah.
and that they have a dignified experience at the end of their life. And so, again, that all ties back into education, making sure that they're aware of what hospice is, what it can provide, what it does in the community,
Yeah.
as far as, helping, titrate medications as we go further down into the hospice process, supplies that are covered that they usually would have to pay for,
Mm.
talking about specific disease processes, with the hospice nursing team that kind of specializes in it to get them prepared for what's to come.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think making sure families really truly understand what hospice is and what those expectations are, I think, are really what's going to create a positive outcome.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Little shift, if we can maybe jump into like how leaders can or carry that message with their teams.
Yeah. So, um, you know, with that being said, I always want to include hospice with the care team, to get them to also understand what hospice is, because at the end of the day, our care team, they are our core, they are our backbone. We couldn't do it without them. They tend to have the most interaction with the resident and the resident families. And so if they're not understanding what hospice is and what it does, then how are we expecting the resident or the resident family to know,
Yeah.
right? So I think, when it comes to hospice, including them in, your lunch and learns and your education pieces with hospice, and having, your hospice nurses explaining, kind of what's going on in the disease process. Especially if caregivers tend to get really, connected and really close to residents because we take care of them every day. And sometimes that can be hard, to see somebody decline and not understand, what's happening, what's going on, why can't we do more? making sure that you have that hospice group and nurse that really know how to take care of those people and really educate on what's going on, what's happening, what what is more to you, what are you wanting to see, because maybe they think they're gonna spring right back to how they were, and they have to
Yeah.
understand that sometimes those are not realistic expectations.
Hmm.
So ensuring that you have a really great hospice group in your community that's able to understand that and share that is really what's going to have a successful outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah. Awesome. Uh, you mentioned leading with compassion. What does that look like in a tough staff conversation?
Again, that's really leading with compassion has it really can mean a lot for a lot of other people, but at the end of the day, it means you're prioritizing understanding.
Yeah.
So we're not focusing necessarily on the issue at hand. We're focused on the person at that moment, where they're at. Um, you know, able to understand that everybody comes from different backgrounds. Everybody has different experiences in life. And so when you're able to lead with compassion, understand people, and love them where they're at, that's where you're going to see a lot of success when it comes to staff retention. You're going to have increased satisfaction amongst not only your care team but your residents and families, because they're going to see that, because that bleeds over. um, and I think also you're going to see an increase in engagement and motivation from the care team, because they're going to be able to see that you really do care.
Yeah.
You really care, you really hear what they have to say. And I think that whenever we're leading with compassion, we really forget that we're working with people every day. And I think if we slow down and really focus on the situation at hand and not just the issue, you're going to see a lot of times that it's just that person that's needing that extra time and extra care
Mm.
in order to understand really what's going on.
Yeah. You had a quote. It was seek to understand before you seek to be understood,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Awesome. And what does clear expectations look like
Yeah.
in the same conversation?
Clear expectations. So, when you're leading with compassion, there's a fine line there, because you have to be able to lead with compassion, but you also have to strike that balance of clear expectations. So again, so you're understanding that, again, we're working with people every day, but at the end of the day, we're here to take care of people. So we have to ensure that we're doing our job. We're taking care of our residents. We're supporting family members. We're really ensuring that everybody is trained, that they understand and are educated in senior living, and what they'll see as far as disease prognoses and things like that. So, I think it's really, really important that, you take care of your people, because at the end of the day, if you don't take care of your people, how are we expecting them to take care of our residents?
Hmm.
Right. And
Yeah.
so when you have a team that feels heard, and you have a team that feels like they're included in the conversations and situations like that, and they also know how to do their job and do it well, that's when you're going to see the best part of people. And I
Right.
think that, a leader that is able to display that is a leader that you want to keep, for sure.
Awesome. What metrics improved when you led this way?
Yeah, I have to say, even, e- we're seeing across the board, because even with COVID, employee retention and during COVID was awful across the board. Everywhere you go, everybody was leaving, quitting, things like that. Now, that's not just in senior living, that's just the facts of life across the nation, right? And the world. Um, but, believe it or not, we're still recouping from that. But I have to say, in the last probably 2 years, I could say that we are getting more stabilized in that. Even us as a company, we have, decreased our turnover by at least, I think it was 15% this year. And so things like that are what's telling us we're doing the right thing. So, Merrill Gardens is real big on pushing kindness and compassion and really understanding people. And I think that, my morals and my I guess kind of how I align really aligns with Merrill. And so it's a great partnership. And so yeah, I think that whenever, as we're talking about metrics, that says it right there. When you're able to retain your staff and you're able to keep those people that really love what they do and they love where they work, that that paints a picture right there that you're running a successful ship.
Awesome. And yeah, so retention, satisfaction, fewer escalations.
Yep.
Um, awesome. And do you have a 30-second checklist leaders can for leaders basically before they walk into like a high emotion meeting?
I don't necessarily have a checklist, but one of my favorite things to say is I have a book on that. So, whenever I am training new nurses, I always bring emotional intelligence book with me, and I actually get them a copy and for them to do, because at the end of the day, if you can understand your emotions and you can understand your feelings and why you react to the things that you do react poorly on, you know how to correct those and you know how to navigate those conversations. And so I don't necessarily have a checklist, but I always provide that information of kind of how I operate and how, what's really helped me. And
Yeah.
I have to say that the nurses, that really take that to heart and really read it, dive into it, practice it every day, you see a substantial increase in productivity. You
Yeah.
see a retention rate increase. I mean, it's great. So, being able to dump into that person of, hey, this is what's helped me. I want to give this to you and show you kind of how it is to be a strong leader and not just leading and metrics and keep performance indicators, all that jazz. It's not just about that, but it's also about how you lead a team. So
Yeah. Great. You mentioned not matching energy.
mhm.
Right? Do you have a time you didn't match energy and it changed the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I could give you a million examples as I probably encounter this every day in some form or another, not even just in work. It could be out in the grocery store, it could be anywhere, but when it comes to not matching energies, again, when you're using those steps of taking a breath, stepping back, understanding the issue is not with you, there's something kind of driving that frustration. When you're not matching that energy, you're able to kind of bring that energy that is coming at you and lowering it. Because a lot of people, and it's very, very natural for people to want to match it because that's just kind of how we're wired. Um, so if you want them to kind of, settle down, slow down, and really look at the situation, you have to do that first. You
Yeah.
have to bring it down. You have to be calm. You have to be the one that shows grace. You have to really understand, show true wanting to understand of what's happening with that person. And so again, matching energies, I do this every day. I've had residents come up to me before while I'm, in communities, and they're really upset about something, and they're really upset about, something that happened, or somebody
Yeah.
that did something, and when I'm able to really kind of reinforce and say, yeah, I understand. I would be really upset too.
Mhm.
That I'm so sorry that that happened to you. What can I do to help? Or what can we do to do better? Really get them to understand they are seeing that I'm not trying to argue with them. I'm trying to truly understand what it
Yeah.
is that we can do to do better, and to make sure that they're happy. And I think when, not all the time, but I think a lot of times when people see that you're really trying to understand them and not necessarily trying to match energy, they really again will kind of follow your suit,
Mm.
slow down, understand, we're here to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I've had really great success with that. And I've never had great success when I've matched an energy.
Mm.
So if that
Yeah.
tells you anything about success, I don't know what doesn't. So yeah, it's a finesse, and you learn, and you have to practice it in order for you to get really good at it. But again, being able to step outside that box and really control the situation,
Yeah.
I think is really what sets apart a great leader.
Awesome. Yeah. Um, it just when did you like identify this? I'm sure this came with experience, and like how long did it take you to make that shift? And um, yeah, like when did you start to put that in practice?
Yeah. So when I say that this is it's a skill, it is a skill.
Yeah.
This is not something that I learned overnight. This is not something, again, that I can truly teach somebody, because again, I can give you the tools and I can tell you how to handle situations. Um, you know, but at the end of the day, if you, as the person wanting to do better and wanting to learn how to do that, you have to be able to put in the work. And a lot of times you're being put in uncomfortable conversations, situations that you're not used to, and not used to responding in that way. And so
Yeah.
it feels very unnatural
Mm.
to do that. But again, as you are practicing that more and more, you start to see, oh, well, that went better than I thought.
Mm.
Or, you're getting less complaints, things like that. So you start seeing the bright side of, kind of stepping out and kind of really looking at the situation at a high level. And so, yeah, I think that it's just truly important to understand that, when we're dealing with people, we're going to run into these types of situations, and
Yeah.
it's all about how you want to handle it and what you want your outcome to be.
Mm. Awesome. From how we show up as leaders to how we grow leaders on our teams, how do you decide when to delegate versus empower? And maybe a success story you have from empowerment.
Yeah. So, this is probably my second passion, when it comes to my work and my practice, is growing people and knowing the difference between delegation and empowering. So, as people, I think we're kind of wired just delegation to be normal. So, task given, task done, right? We write grocery lists and then we go get the groceries, right? We write lists of our to do lists and then we just check them off as we go, right? That it's just a normal part of kind of how we're wired. But the great part of that is when the empowerment comes into play. So, you're going to come across people, whether you're a leader in an assisted living community, or you're a leader at HEB, which is our grocery store here in Texas, um, you know, that is when you're able to see people that want to do better.
Mhm.
And having that ability to identify when you see that in people. So, finding those that yearn for more, they want to grow in whatever situation that they're at, being a leader that is able to help them in that is really what sets apart a great successful leader, is because you're dumping into those people. You're really investing a lot of time into them. And I think that, when it comes to wanting to empower somebody or grow somebody, that takes a lot of dedication on both ends of the fence.
Yeah.
So, in order for that to be successful, we have to have somebody able that says, hey, I want to grow, I want to do better. But you also have to have somebody that's going to set them up for success and really support them in what they're wanting to do. And I think that when you have those people that come together and understand that, we really have something special here, that's when
Mhm.
you're going to see your teams are going to start seeing, hey, they help that person. They want us to do better. That's going to build trust. It's going to build confidence within your team. It encourages, again, growth and innovation. So, specifically in the senior living industry, you know, technology changes all the time. And we're always looking for better ways of doing things. And so, who better than our caregivers who take care of our residents with such grace and such just I could go on and on about how great they are, but seeing them come to me and say, "Hey, I I have a better way of doing this."
Mm.
And seeing that in play and seeing that, yeah, they're right. That is a better way of doing it. They feel that trust and that confidence in that leader to say, hey, I have an idea and I think that
Yeah.
this would work better. And so when that is when you see that empowerment and that delegation shift. So I'm
Yeah.
no longer delegating tasks. I'm empowering people. And that's how you build a strong team, is whenever you're able to, number one, identify those people. Number two, pour everything you have into them, and dedication and investment, um, because at the end of the day, you're only as strong as your team. And
Yeah.
so when you have a strong team, you're a strong leader.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, delegation, it's executing tasks, right? Empowering is ownership
Yep,
and growth.
absolutely.
Do you have any like training or like check-ins with that?
Yeah, so personally in my practice right now, I have one-on-ones with my nurses, and that could be every week, it could be every other week, just depending on what the need is. We really dig into kind of not only like what's going on in the community or kind of what we're needing to improve on, but like what necessarily are they really good at, and how can I help grow that? How can I help support that? And if I see something like that, I'm always wanting to kind of showcase it. So, for instance, if I have a nurse that I know is really good at doing a crossover. So, for instance, having like a crossover when it comes to shifts, right? So, morning shift will be leaving and evening shift will come on. She's really good at crossover and having like a report of what happened the day, what we need to still get accomplished, things like that. I'm going to utilize her and I'm going to have her do a presentation on it, because that is the way that I want our teams to lead. And what better way than having a peer display what they're really good at?
Yeah.
And so I'm always looking for those little nuggets that really just need a little shining, a little polishing, and really help them, especially when they say, hey, I want to be in your shoes one day. I'm going to do everything I can to ensure that we get them the exposure. And the other thing to that is, I always say that when we're growing people, it's kind of like taking care of a plant. So you have to water it, you have to nourish it, you have to expose it to sunlight, right? So it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of just time into that person. So I think that whenever, we're able to do that, we're able to provide a successful setup for that person and get them exposure to other types of maybe areas of leadership, that's where you're going to start seeing a shift on, hey, I got this confidence because I didn't think I could do it, but Ashleigh said, hey, lead this meeting, and I did it great.
Yeah.
So I love seeing those moments, because that, to me personally, is what makes it all worth it.
Yeah. Do you see what are the signs that someone's ready for that empowerment and maybe the supports you put in place?
Yeah. So, when I see that light bulb moment of, oh, or aha, that tells me they're ready, because what led up to that is how people that want to grow think. So for instance, if I tell them, hey, do XYZ, they'll do XYZ, but are they going to do it to their best ability, right? They
Yeah.
have to understand the why behind the what. And so, you know when I'm able to explain why it is that we're doing a certain task or something that they don't quite understand what we're having to do, and they truly, it just clicks with, oh, that's why, you're going to start seeing your team really just outperforming, because now they have a personal, I guess, connection now to that. And so they see that that is passion, and they want to improve on that. And so when we have those, light bulb moments, that I always say that that's like a shift in perspective. So we have head knowledge, and then we have heart knowledge. And when those two connect, that's when you're going to see those, oh, light bulb moments of, that's why we do it, or that's why we should do it this way, things like that. So really, again, educating, getting them to understand the why behind the what is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
So I think, when I see those light bulb moments, that tells me that they're really trying to connect the way that they are thinking of how we care for these people. And that tells me that they're ready. They're ready to grow. They're ready to, think outside the box and really dedicate themselves in, growing in their role.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. I think like the notes I had mention like the maybe signals are like they're asking for more. And they're bringing solutions and
Yep.
curious. Yeah. Um, what what's your go-to like 30, 60, 90 for a newly empowered lead?
Yeah. So, Um, with that, again, my toolbox, or what I kind of use, is the Emotional Intelligence book by Dr. Bradberry. I present that and explain to him, kind of, again, the why behind the what. Why is this important? What even is emotional intelligence, and how it's connected to their role, and even spilling into their personal life, because it really does change the way that you look at things, and the way that you look at situations and conversations that sometimes are just hard. Um, and so typically, what that looks like is, we'll go over that, what it is, how to practice it every day. And then in 90 days, they will take a retest on the emotional intelligence predictor for where you're at. And that way, that is clear, defined proof they've actually improved when it comes to their emotional intelligence and how they react to situations. And so, after they finish that book, on our one-to-ones, I'll kind of talk about, kind of what they've learned during that. And we'll talk about how they scored, maybe what was their lowest point, what was their highest point. And then in 90 days, we're going to talk again about how they improved in those areas, and necessarily like how did they do it, right? So they have to realize that they had to put this into motion, and they had to understand this and really understand why this was important. And when I see, nurses take that and they take it and run with it, I see it's really, really great to see people just flourish, because not only do you see their skill set grow, but you see their confidence grow. And that's where you're again going to start seeing that magic of, well, I can do this, I can do that, I can, help with this. They want to do more, right? And so I think, able to identify that is really, where it's at.
Yeah, awesome. And so, tr- shifting here, let's talk about the community versus home. Uh, maybe some
Yeah.
key differences families should know, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So I have to say, big big differences between hospice and communities versus hospice at home. And like I said, I've done both. So I feel, from my personal opinion, I can speak to both, in the fact that, when it comes to having hospice in home, it's great. I tended to really bond with that family, because the family is requiring a lot of support, because at the end of the day, they're there by themselves a lot of times. They don't have that support or that help. And so they're really leaning into their nurses for that education and that support, and what comes next kind of thing. And it becomes a much more intimate space, versus in our memory cares, or even in assisted living, when we're having people on hospice, the community level, again, we're able to see those things earlier and predict those things earlier, and kind of we're able to kind of ease into that conversation of hospice a little more, because we're seeing a trend. We're able to prepare them for what's next. We're able to kind of support more when it comes to wrapping their head around the idea of hospice. Um, and so, they both are great, hospice at home versus community, but I can tell you the community level is just great, especially when it comes to family support, because not only do you have your hospice nurse that is there, they're the experts on this, able to educate, you also have a support with a nurse who works day in and day out with this resident, and can kind of help support their hospice nurse, but also support that family and understanding what's going on. And we're kind of a mediator in that fact that, we're not necessarily kind of trying to tell them how, their care should be ran, but we're also supporting, because we have that knowledge of hospice. So we're able to support what hospice does, but we're also understanding where that family is because we've built that rapport. We know where they're at. We know their family circumstances. We understand maybe what they're struggling with. So, community level, we're kind of able to tie all that in. And so, having hospice in communities that, especially when residents could really benefit from it, it really, at the end of the day, that resident a lot of times sometimes will do better than when if they didn't have hospice. And we've had residents get on hospice and they actually do great. And then they graduate off hospice and then they're like, wait, where did my hospice nurse go?
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
things like that. And so, when I have those types of situations where I have residents and families upset because they've done so well and they have to graduate from hospice. That tells me that we did the right thing, that we did a good job, and that they're not scared anymore.
Yeah.
So that's a successful case.
Awesome. And let's land this with maybe some ways to connect. What are the top 5 signs you see it's time to consider hospice and assisted living?
Yeah. You know, um, as a nurse, when we start seeing, when we have people, coming in, learning their routines, we know their diagnoses, we know kind of how they are, we can identify quicker when they are off their baseline. And so, top 5 things that kind of flag as a nurse, especially in a community, is when they stop having an appetite. Because I can tell you, living in senior living, they live for meals, they live for the dining room and all of that. And so, when I start seeing, that they don't want to come down for meals or that they're only finishing half their plate, when I know that they're a second helping kind of resident, that
Mhm.
flags something to me. Um, when they start having changes in cognition, meaning they're more confused. And it not might not necessarily be, UTI connected or whatnot, but you can tell that there's a general shift in their confusion and their orientation. Another one would probably be weight loss, and that would be connected to the appetite. And so when we start seeing that, we start getting worried, right? And that tells me, we need to start adding in supplements, and we need to start maybe a medication that'll boost appetite, things like that. And that's when we really start getting into oh, maybe we're going to need hospice, because that's something that also can kind of help us talk to the family about what we're seeing. Um, Another thing is they start sleeping a lot. So you'll see that they're kind of more reclused, withdrawn. They stay in their room more. They sleep during the day a lot. They may be up at night. Um, but you're going to start seeing a decrease in energy levels. Um, the other one is falls. Falls is a big one. When they start falling, we tend to think that when people fall, it's just kind of part of the aging process, and it's not. When a elderly person falls, that should tell you that something's off.
Yeah.
Now, whether that be a decline in just their general ADLs, or it actually being something wrong, meaning like a UTI or their blood pressure or some type of infection, things like that. But all of those things, when they start falling, and there's no reason why they should be falling, that's another trigger for me, is something else is going on. Um, and probably the fifth thing I would have to say is I would say pain. Um, you know, Unfortunately, dying is not a pain-free experience a lot of times.
Right.
And so, if they're asking for more Tylenol, or if they're saying that they just have a pain that they just can't get under control, that tells me something is off, something is
Mhm.
wrong, and we need to look at it.
Yeah.
And so when those things kind of come together, that kind of tells us that we really need to talk with family, because with all of this, painting a picture, this looks like this is the road that we're going down. And I think it's really important that as soon as we identify that, we're having those conversations with that family, to not necessarily say hospice today, but it's coming.
Yeah.
And just preparing them and getting them to understand that hospice is not scary, that it's a layer of support for the family and for the team there. And so, yeah, I think that, like I said, when we're seeing those types of symptoms and we're able to pick up on that sooner, you're able to have a more successful outcome when it comes to residents and their hospice experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. That's all I have for today. Love to do this again. Uh,
Yeah.
I feel you have a lot of knowledge, and I think this is going to be a very valuable episode for people. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. And that's it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Anytime.
If you're looking to attract more families and share your hospice mission with a wider community, visit hospicecaremarketing.com/schedule to schedule your free consultation with marketing expert and founder Brian France. Plus, join our free Hospice Marketing Mastermind group on LinkedIn to connect with other practice leaders and stay up to date with the latest strategies. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. We'd love to hear from you.